This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Good evening, and thanks for staying with Radio Now 95.3 FM, Lagos. It's now 5 o'clock, and you're welcome to The Big Story. Today we're talking about financial matters, economic matters, if you will. We're talking about the policies of the Central Bank of Nigeria and the direction it is moving this country in. We're going to be asking the question, are the CBN's policies in line with its stated direction for 2024? The federal government says it has cleared all valid foreign exchange. So I'll take that again. It clears all valid foreign exchange backlogs effectively. It says eliminating a legacy burden in fulfillment of the commitments made by the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso. He's vowed to address the inherited backlog of $7 billion in claims. Now, this month has also seen Nigeria's foreign reserves rise by $993 million to $34.11 billion. At the last monetary policy meeting, the CBN raised the monetary policy rate from 18.75% to 22.75%. And it also increased the cash reserve ratio, CRR, from 32.5% to 45%. Now, this is there's quite a lot of numbers going on there. So I don't want to lose, our listener. Basically, they are tinkering with the economy they inherited, and they are carrying out different actions to try to move it in a certain direction. Now, at the 58th annual Bankers' Dinner in Lagos, this was last year, November 2023, the governor of the CBN says the monetary policy direction of the bank for 2024 is to prioritize price and exchange rate stability. This is the governor of the central bank and what he said.
The primary mandate of the CBN is to ensure price stability, in addition to other objectives such as issuing legal tender currency, safeguarding external reserves, promoting a sound financial system, and providing economic and financial advice to the government. In line with our strategy to refocus on our core mandate, the CBN will discontinue direct quasi-fiscal interventionist activities and instead utilize orthodox monetary policy tools for implementing monetary policy. As part of this refocus, the CBN has just approved the adoption of an explicit inflation targeting framework to enhance the effectiveness of our monetary policy. Additionally, the CBN will provide forward guidance, enhance transparency, and maintain effective communication with the public to anchor expectations and build trust among stakeholders. Our monetary policies will aim to achieve price stability, foster economic growth, stabilize the exchange rate of the naira, and reduce interest rates to facilitate borrowing and investing in the real sector. We have already witnessed improvements in FX market liquidity in recent weeks as the market responded positively to tranche payments which have been made to 31 banks to clear the backlog of FX forward obligations.
Right, that was last November, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Olayemi Cardoso. Now, questions to ask. Is the CBN on track? Most importantly, what does the real sector, business owners out there, the market, what does the real sector make of these policies and overall plan of the Apex Bank? And also, how will micro and small businesses weather this economic storm which began raging on the 29th of May last year? Now, joining me for the discussion this evening, I have Mr. Adeboyega Adebajo, who's the Chief Executive Officer at the West Atlantic Resource and Equity House. He's an economist with over 25 years experience as an investment banker and financial advisor. Mr. Adebajo, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, Camry. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Yusuf, I also have on the other line Mr. Adebajo, but let me welcome as well Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Muda Yusuf is the Chief Executive Officer, the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE. He is the immediate past Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Big Story as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. In February 2024, the headline inflation rate increased to 31.7%. Now, this has seen many goods being priced outside the reach of many Nigerians. People look in their pockets and their naira can only take them so far. So let me start with Dr. Muda Yusuf, first of all. What are your thoughts on this, especially in line with what the governor of the central bank says? These are the reasons why they're taking the policies they're taking, market stability, and so on and so forth, to try to bring inflation down. We currently have a headline inflation rate of 31.7%. This has pushed so many goods beyond the reach of Nigerians. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, my initial thoughts are that the CBN is working within its own parameters, within its own space. Because when we talk about economic management, there's a role for monetary policy and there's a role for fiscal policy. So within the monetary policy environment, the CBN is deploying the tools that is within its own control, which is essentially, all these issues about MPR, CRR, liquidity ratio, and all that. To that extent, I think the CBN is on course. Given the fact that the primary mandate of the CBN is price stability, and the tools available to it are those tools that I've mentioned. This is what the CBN has been using.
Okay.
And the impacts have been both positive and negative.
Okay, please.
Just like any other economic policy matter. There are costs and there are benefits. What is important is to ensure that the net effect is positive. I think that is what is important. There will always be some demerits. There will always be some cost to any economic policy action. So far, so good.
In that regard, okay, Dr. Muda Yusuf, let me come now to Mr. Adegboyega Adebajo. I'll put the same question to you. What are your thoughts, especially from the real sector perspective? We hear businesses, just like Dr. Muda Yusuf has said, he said there's a cost and we're on track, there are good and bad sides. But from the real sector perspective, how do you think the business environment is receiving this? And how does it affect the ability to plan? Can we plan, with the change in, unpredictability, as it were, for people like me of the market now?
Okay, thanks. First, you did speak about inflation. And remember that we're in March, and the figures we have for inflation are as of February. Now, I wish I could speak about the time lag of economic policies and say, well, that was February, we're in March. And given the policy statement that have taken place since the beginning of March, perhaps we will start to see a difference. But I've walked the streets, and it's interesting that prices that I had expected to start going down are not going down yet. Because you're asking about, the real space, what's happening in there. First, the CBN has done very well in its policy announcements. And just like Dr. Yusuf said, there's always, the positive effects and the negative effects, and you're aiming for the net positive effects. On the monetary policy side, so far, so good. But then when we look at what's happening with inflation, I think it would take a few months And that's what we're witnessing, for a slowdown to occur and then a stabilization. And whereas we keep talking about the inflation rates for January, for February, and then probably talk about the one for March, if there was a growth between January and February, was that growth as high as the growth between December 2023 and January 2024, or between November 2023 and December 2023? Once we see that the growth rate of inflation month to month, not year on year,
Okay.
diminish, say the inflation is sort of slowing down, the rate at which it's growing, because we had inflation galloping earlier. So is this due to the effects of what the CBN has done? Yes, I would say so. I woke up this morning to hearing that the dollar had exchanged at 1,400 or thereabouts, but it's in the 1,400s compared to the 1,500s of last week. When will these effects, come down to the man on the street? It may take a few weeks more. One thing we need to bear in mind is that transportation costs affects everyone in Nigeria, everyone. And that means that when you tinker with the prices of petrol, it's the tail end of it is felt in the pockets of the simple man on the streets. I think petrol prices are still not reflecting the fact that there's some stability coming up. But again, for them, it's probably real. Calculations will be based on exchange rates and taxes. So maybe when we start to see the impact of producing petrol locally, we may get a change in that. And hopefully that starts to happen towards the end of this month and early next month. And then we start to see the slowdown. But as you asked, can you plan with what we have? I think you can plan. If you base your rates on 1.5, that will be being pessimistic, but you don't expect it to go above that. It will probably go below that. There's targeting here, and we've heard it said in various articles. I was actually reading a Goldman Sachs article this morning talking about a possible 1,200 naira to the dollar by about the middle of the year. That may or may not be. It's a projection, but is what we have now good enough to plan with? I think so. Choose a worst case scenario and run along with that. That means that it cannot be worse than it was in December last year. And that's to say, I think the CBN policies are in the right direction. I think it's moving us along in the right direction. And I think with time, we will start to see the positive effects.
Okay. Let me come back now to Dr. Muda Yusuf. Food inflation, we understand, accounts for 33% of the consumer price index. From what you see right now, is the government doing enough to check and reverse the current trend of food inflation?
Well, the factors impacting on food inflation are much more structural in nature. And when I say structural, I mean there are things that have to do with factors, critical factors of production. Things like energy, things like transportation, issues of ability to go to the farm, issues of productivity, and of course there is an imported component of the food inflation as well. So, and some of these factors are not factors that you can immediately do something to change, because they are a bit fundamental. And that is why one needs to caution in terms of expecting that maybe the CBN policy alone can solve this problem, particularly this inflation problem. We need a combined effect of fiscal and monetary policy. Otherwise, we may drive the financial system to the extreme and almost to the point of strangulation. because CRR, which is called cash reserve ratio, is already at 45%. I don't know anywhere in the world where you have that kind of cash reserve ratio. And what that means to the layman,
yes,
or in elementary terms, is that for every 100 million naira deposit that enters the banking system, 45 million of it is sterilized. It's taken out of the banking system.
okay.
We have what we call liquidity ratio of 30%. So 30% of that money is also kept in what we call liquid assets. Things like treasury bills, cash, and things that you can easily convert to cash. So what is left for the bank to do business effectively? Just 25% of the deposit.
Okay, Dr. Yusuf, sorry to interrupt you there. Sorry to interrupt you there. Sorry, Dr. Yusuf, before you move off, given what you've just said, I'm now looking at the MPR that has been revised by 400 basis points. Now, given the fact that you just explained to us in very good layman terms that there's now this amount of cash available for business to be traded with and so on and so forth, with the MPR rate, now, doesn't that make borrowing the very reduced available cash more expensive because the percentage has gone up, hasn't it? The borrowing rate.
Of course, it's making borrowing very expensive. Even all these things that I've mentioned.
So what does that mean for the small businesses?
Because you can only give what you have.
Exactly. So what does that mean for businesses who, for example?
No, it's making life more difficult for business in terms of capacity to access credit, to run the business.
Yes.
And in terms of ability even to service existing debt. We talk to those people who are owing the bank now. They are groaning. It's not easy. Somebody just told me this morning, or even a bank loan that somebody has been struggling to service. It was almost going bad. And yet, the business has gone down. The man is struggling to service the debt because of this increase in MPR. The bank has revised upward the interest rate, increasing the amount of the burden of servicing the debt. So the point I'm making is that we need to also be careful so that we don't go to the extreme of taking steps that will affect growth, that will affect those who are trying to even produce things in the economy. That is why we're talking of a balance.
Yes. Because
I don't know anywhere around the world where you have this kind of, very extreme tightening of monetary policy. Because we have been tightening monetary policy for over 2 years. I mean, what material effect has it brought? Now, we are taking extreme positions in monetary policy. Will that bring down the cost of diesel? Will that bring down the cost of rice? Will that bring down the cost of PMS? Will it bring down the cost of food? These are things that are driven by a lot more of structural factors. So, yes, it is good for CBN to rely on its tools and all of that, but we need to see a lot more in terms of what incentives is the government given for those who are in production, so that it can produce a lot more. Because the CBN position is tightening their conditions even more. Now, the CBN is trying to fight liquidity so that they can regulate, inflation and also the exchange rate. That is the objective. But what are the sources of this liquidity? A lot of resources is now in the public sector as a result of this reform. The states, local government, and federal government are having access to more money than ever before in the issue of this country. And part of this money is fueling inflation, it's also putting pressure on the exchange rate. What are we doing to moderate that kind of effect? Because if they have that money, it's their money, they are free to spend it.
Yes.
PRR, MPR, or no MPR, it is their money. The bank cannot stop them from spending it. So at the end of the day, it is the business people that are interfacing with the banks that are behind the brunt of this thing. So it's a double-edged sword. But the point I'm making is that the basic things affecting the average people, the average man on the street, are this elementary cost of food, cost of transportation, cost of energy, all those things. What are we doing to accelerate domestic refining of petroleum products? What are we doing to ensure that more people are able to go back to the farm? What are we doing to bring down the cost of diesel, the cost of PMS? These are not monetary policy issues.
Okay.
These are fiscal policy issues.
Yes.
So we need to see a lot more. What incentives are we giving? Let me give you an example now.
Very quickly, sir.
If anybody is importing anything now, the customs duty with which you clear your cargo has almost gone up by 100%.
Yeah.
So you sold the dollar at a very prohibitive rate. You land your products at the port. To clear it, you are paying very prohibitive rate to clear the goods. It is compounding the problem of inflation. That is not monetary policy. So these are some of the things that we need to moderate so that the impact on the citizens will not be too extreme.
Okay, let me come back to Mr. Adebajo. I'll pick up roughly from where Dr. Muda Yusuf just left off regarding the everyday man. Let's look at the everyday businesses, small SMEs, and so on and so forth. I'll use our business as an example. We wanted to buy some standing fans to cover some areas. When we sent the department out to go and get the price check and everything for us, they came back with about 45,000 naira. By the time things were approved, which was just 3 days later, 45,000 naira at the same shop, it's a jumps to 70,000 naira. Now the same product is going for about 90,000, maybe 100,000 naira. Hence my earlier question of the ability to plan. What is this situation doing for SMEs in today's Nigeria's economy? How are SMEs, contending with this, and what can be done to create the enabling environment the president promised?
Okay, thanks. I listened to I listened earlier, and it was somewhat I could feel the passion, okay, there. But the truth is, the tightening of the monetary policy was necessary, essentially to reduce the amount of naira chasing after dollars. But there's still that aspect, that fiscal aspect, where the emphasis is in terms of how it underscores the fact that prices are not going down. And for some reason, prices are still going up. And just last week, Cambria also experienced a price changing within 2 days of going to the same place. So it's real, it's out there for everyone. SMEs are not excluded from all this. Can diesel, aviation, turbine, kerosene, petrol, can these prices that affect the structure, the factors that go into production and services, can they come down instantly like that? Perhaps not. It will take time. There's always a lag. But there's something that's very important that the government needs to start looking at. And I think it's about a trade-off between how to stimulate the businesses and ensure that their heads are above water. And the simplest way, I believe, this can be done is by reducing taxes significantly. First of all, I know the government needs to raise money to fund the budgets. But then again, you have a population that has been drained of energy, okay? And when I say energy, I mean physical resources. And then you've got economic resources being drained. You've got a population, a business population outside the public sector that has been buffeted by inconsistencies from the former central bank administration. And then with prices going up because of the exchange rate and inflation rising over there, all of a sudden, taxes are coming out of nooks and corners. And that's why we saw the reaction to the expatriate employment levy a few weeks ago. It is important not to increase the costs of doing business. As those costs increase, those prices would easily, instantly be transferred to the consumer. And it's so sad that it's happening. I feel from a fiscal perspective, the government needs to be deliberate about that. Now, there's something Dr. Yusuf said about the duty payments. And I think that's a very, very important example. It was about January, late January, early February, that the central bank announced the increase in the Naira exchange rate to calculate duty. And it went up to 1,300 Naira. I think it's time for the central bank to drop that rate, given the fact that at the time it went up to 1,300 Naira, the Naira exchange rate in the parallel market was somewhere around 1,600, 1,700. It's come down this much now. Again, to complement fiscal policy, to complement all the policies they have issued out right now to get the price stability where it needs to be in terms of affordability too. There's a need to bring that down. Will that mean a sudden increase in Nigerians rushing to import things? No, it wouldn't. It will be the same level of demand. And I think there's a lot in terms of statistics and data right now to be able for us to be able to monitor the demand in terms of what comes in and what we need. So when we start to do things like that, reducing the exchange rate factor used to calculate duty, reducing taxes as an incentive where we can, it would help. True, the monetary policy is pretty tight with the cash reserve ratio, the liquidity ratio, MPR at 27. Borrowing is not something to exactly be encouraged at this time, except you're sure that you can get returns of 30% at the least on the activities you're doing. But it's important to look at possibilities of credit. I was listening to an interview by the MD of Afrexim Bank in terms of the structuring done for the central bank and the NNPC. And yes, the central bank has been able to clear the backlog, but clearing the backlog wasn't done by taking money out of a bag where money was kept. It was done by adjusting, okay, and refinancing short-term obligations into much longer term, much more comfortable obligations. And resetting the timing of those obligations eased up the pressure on the Naira. And not only did it ease the pressure on the Naira, it also unlocked the collateral on our reserves. And that is why we can suddenly wake up in the morning and find out we've got 34 billion dollars out there in reserves. So it's important to think about that too when it comes to companies. Just as the country was able to refinance itself and get longer term lending or borrowing, as it were, at a rate that allowed it to be able to meet the obligations over time. Companies in the same way need to be able to do this. 27 isn't going to work for a lot of companies, not for a lot of service companies. Otherwise, these prices will keep being passed on to consumers. And at a point in time, consumers are going to stop buying certain products and look for certain alternatives. I can tell you, I had a conversation with some people and they're like, bread, I think I'm going to stop buying bread. I need to look for an alternative, and all of a sudden you hear, well, anyway, white flour is not something I want to eat every day. So people will start looking to the alternatives then. Okay. The alternatives are not necessarily cheaper. So for me, I think it's important to start looking in terms of fiscal incentives for companies at this time. If at all, they must continue with the monetary policy indicators that have been set. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'll just come very quickly, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I will allow 30 seconds for your closing remarks. Dr. Muda Yusuf, if you will, sir.
Well, what I would say is that we need to recognize that it's a developing economy. We need to also relate to the peculiarities of this economy. We need to also be more measured in the way we adopt this orthodox monetary policy principle or economic management principles. There's a lot of advice coming from the IMF, the World Bank. We need to be more selective and a bit more discriminatory to know that this is not exactly the same economy as you have in US, in UK, and all of that. Where some of these tools can easily, give you the right outcomes. So that localization of policy is extremely very important, and I think our policymakers need to do a lot more of that, relating to the peculiarities of this economy and intervening where necessary in order to be able to achieve the right outcomes.
Okay, thank you so much to Dr. Muda Yusuf, Chief Executive Officer, the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises. He's also the immediate past Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thanks so much, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And also thank you so much to Mr. Adegboyega Adebajo. He's the CEO at the West Atlantic Resource and Equity House. He's an economist with over 25 years experience as an investment banker and a financial advisor. He's also my professor at Pan Atlantic University. Thank you so much for joining us on.
You're welcome, Camry. You're welcome, Camry. I'm glad to be able to join you. Thanks.
Much appreciated. Right, that's all we have time for on the big story this evening. We'll take some messages, and when we come back, I'll meet you on the round table.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.